Tonight on Bridge City News, a grant worth more than $700,000 has been given to the University of Calgary to help Indigenous communities tackle drug-related issues. The province of PEI banned plastic bags on Canada Day. Will Alberta be next? And the federal Conservatives are blaming the Liberals for what they are saying is another cover-up. We have the details.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. We begin tonight with another Lethbridge drug bust, this one taking place in the Indian Battle Heights neighborhood on the west side. Alert Lethbridge's organized crime team seized a loaded gun, a knife, methamphetamines, carfentanil, fentanyl, cocaine, and over $5,000 in cash. 47-year-old Eldon Myers and 50-year-old Sherry Komar face a wide range of charges, including drug possession, trafficking, and firearms offenses. Alert wants to remind you, if you see any drug or gang-related activity in your neighborhood, to call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-8477. Lethbridge police are cracking down on vehicle violations. Over the past few days, the Traffic Response Unit has been inspecting vehicles with mechanical and equipment violations. Ainsley O'Reilly explains that these infractions are a lot more common than you might think.
Starting on July 30th, Lethbridge Police have began a 3-day initiative to inspect commercial vehicles. Yesterday, they inspected 68 vehicles, and of those vehicles, 72% of them failed the inspection.
Well, it seems to be always the same. Cargo securement is always a big issue, and then a number of different types of mechanical. We'll find worn components on the driveline or suspension. Brakes, always a big issue. Not adjusted properly, not functioning properly. Airlines worn. Vehicles with air brakes. Airlines are a critical component. If you lose an airline, you lose your brakes. There's actually quite a range of things that can happen.
Most of the fines are in the $310 range, but if it's related to cargo securement, they can be $776 per offense. Dangerous goods are $465, and overweight loads are calculated per pound.
Last year in Medicine Hat, I issued a total of about $3,000 in fines to one driver. I know of some commercial guys in spring and fall when they have road bans on the outer areas, and they catch drivers that are running still full loads. The fines can exceed $10,000 if they're running full load on a road that has significant reduced weight allowances.
A hefty price to pay, but a lesson for the future to keep our roads safe. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The University of Calgary has received a grant totaling $713,000 to help Indigenous communities tackle the growing opioid problem. The project will mainly focus on research and increasing the use of Suboxone, which is a drug that helps an addict wean off of opioids over time. Rita Henderson is an assistant professor of family medicine at the U of C, and she says the goal of the project is to work with a handful of people in a number of remote Indigenous communities.
If we can show that we can do this with 50 or 70 individuals, we create a knowledge base that shows a little bit more how-to in contexts that are a little bit different than, the urban centers that we see a lot of access in. I'm finding that a lot of people within diverse jurisdictional areas just don't have it in their mandate to imagine connecting to somebody in another agency. And so the opportunities that we can spend this type of funding on are for meetings and convening people and doing webinars and sharing knowledge in ways that it's not as actively shared.
Henderson says that because of their data sharing agreements, they're not permitted to disclose which communities they'll be focusing their attention on. A judge has ruled that wage arbitration hearings for tens of thousands of public sector workers can go ahead sooner rather than later. A bid by the AUPE for an injunction preventing the UCP government from implementing the recently passed Bill 9 calls for delaying contract provisions for reopened wage talks and binding arbitration for public sector workers.
It's a great victory for the members, but it's not like we're going to stop doing the information pickets and getting out and talking to our members, because Bill 9 is still there. It's just temporarily has an injunction so that we can continue that arbitration. So we are going to still continue to fight for the rights of our members, and especially because we anticipate further attacks, budget cuts, anti-worker legislation, and all that coming in the future. So we still will be holding the information pickets that are already scheduled, and there's more being scheduled all the time.
Alberta Finance Minister Travis Taves says the government will appeal the ruling and seek an expedited hearing. A man from Lethbridge has been fined $500,000 by the Saskatchewan financial regulators. The agency says Ron Aitkins and his foundation group of companies committed fraud by illegally raising $10.4 million from investors for a wide range of development projects. The money was transferred to other companies under Aitkins' control or to make payments to other investors. A criminal charge of fraud has also been laid against Aitkin. Sobeys recently announced they are phasing out plastic bags by next year. This comes shortly after PEI issued a province-wide ban of their own. Now, will this come to Alberta? We sent a crew down to the farmers market today to find out if single-use plastics should be banned here in Alberta.
I truly believe they should. I think it's the way to go. I mean, obviously, it's the right thing for the environment. There's no reason why we shouldn't follow suit or go that direction if other provinces are doing so.
Alberta should ban single-use plastics, just like other jurisdictions in North America and around the world. It doesn't break down. It takes however thousands of years to break down that plastic.
Should have done it a long time ago. We've seen enough damage to the oceans. It needs to be gone. We can manage.
Alberta's only province-wide food festival is making a stop in Lethbridge. Alberta on the Plate runs August 9th through the 18th and features many great foods from restaurants in our area. Angel Harper of Mocha Cabana is one of the participating restaurants taking part, and she gave us a preview of what to expect.
Haskap berries are becoming a great crop in southern Alberta. So one of the courses we're going to be featuring is our bakers going to be making Haskap berry cheesecake. So using our famous cheesecake recipe and making Haskap berry compote and incorporating that into a dessert. Other farmers that we're going to be celebrating during the food festival is Brook Pork Acres. We're going to be doing a barbecue pork tenderloin. We're going to be featuring our Caprese Nan bread, which features just out of Mountain View, Old West Ranch buffalo mozzarella cheese and Broxburn tomatoes, and then of course the Haskap berries.
The province is preserving its past as 2-century-old commercial buildings in Lethbridge have received Provincial Historic Resource designation. The Beau Antong Company and Wing Wong Cha Company buildings reflect on the contributions and hardships of early Chinese immigrants to Alberta. Leila Ahir, Minister of Alberta Culture, Multiculturalism and Status of Women, says the building is one of 10 endangered buildings in Canada.
When you read about the fact that this is an endangered building in Canada, and you read about the Leung family, they had helped out many Chinese immigrants that came through here, kept them at home in their basements, set up several businesses, as you know, that went through here. And it was really a hub for the community to grow.
We had the store, we had the restaurant upstairs next door, and in the old days there used to be gambling, and every store had gambling in the back. And so as kids, it was just like a party every day.
Federal officials are warning that the risk of student loan defaults and delays are on the rise. The latest numbers show federal student debt alone is around $17 billion. The government has to write off millions of dollars in loans it will never collect. Student groups say solutions should include waiving interest payments on student loans and offering more non-repayable grants. Alberta students will now be guaranteed free speech thanks to a government order. The province has instructed all universities and colleges to adopt policies in line with the U.S. initiative, which is based on their First Amendment. The minister has set a November 15th deadline for new policies to be put in place. Officials at the U of L have begun to work to prepare a draft of free speech principles or a policy for the fall of 2019. Lethbridge College, meanwhile, is in the process of creating its own institutional freedom of expression policy. The government of Saskatchewan is asking the Supreme Court to push back its hearing on the constitutionality of the federal carbon tax. The Ministry of Justice says the delay would help Saskatchewan coordinate its legal challenge with similar ones from other provinces. The top court was to hear the case on December the 5th. The move comes after Justice Minister Don Morgan hosted a meeting yesterday with legal teams from Alberta, Ontario, and New Brunswick. Morgan feels the Supreme Court will want to hear all of the various legal arguments or cases at once instead of one at a time because of their similarity. Canadian National Railway says no one was hurt and there were no dangerous goods involved in a derailment in Calgary last night. More than a dozen cars left the tracks outside of CN's Sarcee yard in the northeast part of the city. The derailment blocked traffic and knocked out power in some areas. Calgary City Council has voted to approve a financial agreement with the Calgary Flames to build a new arena. Cost of the project will be around $550 million. Council voted 11-4 to build the new event centre to replace the 36-year-old Saddle Dome.
We believe that we're finally investing in East Victoria Park and that will develop as a cultural and entertainment district, frankly, with or without this deal. But what this allows us to do is have an anchor, and it allows the development of that district to happen just a little bit faster. But ultimately, as the city grows and prospers, this is where we would like to concentrate some of that entertainment kinds of businesses.
I've been asked if I'm happy, and of course we're happy for Calgary, but I think the most fun will be proving to the city of Calgary that we can exceed their expectations, that this really is a great deal, and we'll overachieve.
A new report says the Canadian military is withdrawing from the northern Manitoba hunt for 2 young men who were suspects in 3 BC homicides. The report says the Mounties made the decision that military assistance was no longer needed in the search around Gillam for Briar Schmigelski and Cam McLeod. The military had supplied a Hercules transport out of Winnipeg, but officials say ground and air searches will continue in the area using the RCMP's own resources. The 2 teenagers are charged with a second-degree murder in the death of BC lecturer Leonard Dick. They're also suspects in the deaths of Australian Lucas Fowler and his American girlfriend, China Dees. A commission examining what it refers to as Canada's first known healthcare serial killer says systemic failures allowed Elizabeth Wetlaufer to carry out her crimes without raising suspicion. Wetlaufer, a former nurse, is serving a life sentence after pleading guilty in 2017 to killing 8 patients with insulin overdoses and attempting to kill 4 more. The incidents occurred over a 10-year period when Wetlaufer worked at several long-term care facilities in Ontario. The Commission's report lays out 91 recommendations aimed at preventing such crimes, including measures to make it harder for staff members to divert medication. Conservative MPs say the Liberals are trying to cover up an alleged attempt to pressure former diplomats into clearing public comments on China with the government. Opposition leader Andrew Scheer accused the government of trying to silence his critics.
Here we are again. Justin Trudeau's office once again stands accused of political interference. This time by 2 former diplomats who say Global Affairs Canada, on orders from the Prime Minister's office, attempted to influence their public statements and criticisms on Canada's ongoing conflict with the government of China, again citing the upcoming election as justification for interfering. This is a pattern for Justin Trudeau. He abuses the power of his office to reward his supporters and silence his critics.
South of the border, millions tuned into the Democratic Party debate. Many were willing to voice their opinions on who they thought won.
I think Bernie did well. I think Senator Warren did well. I think Beto did well. I think he did better than last time, which I think says something, because I think everybody else kind of performed the same as they did in the last debate, but I think Beto did better for me than he did in the last debate, so maybe he did just because he improved so much. Maybe he won most improved.
I'm not sure I have any true impressions, other than I feel like Hickenlooper has not been given much of a chance to speak. Elizabeth Warren goes on and on, Bernie Sanders goes on and on. I like Mayor Pete, he seems heads up. All of them seem intelligent. I'm not sure all are qualified.
The FBI says it has 60 people still at the scene of the Garlic Festival shooting in Gilroy, California, where 3 people were killed. They're still trying to understand the motive of the 19-year-old gunman who was killed by police.
I would say that we are not closer to understanding that motive, what happens within the psyche of a 19-year-old kid. I can't speak to that. Determining the motive is an exceptionally important thing for law enforcement to try to understand, 1, why they did it, but 2, are they acting in collaboration with any other individuals? Are they inspired by some other organization? Were they radicalized online? What were the real factors that induced this person to take this kind of heinous action?
Two people are dead, an officer was shot, and a gunman was shot at a Walmart in the northern Mississippi city of South Haven. A gunman described as a disgruntled Walmart employee opened fire, shooting 2 co-workers and wounding a police officer before being shot. Employees say the first shot was in the parking lot and the second one was from inside the store. South Haven is a suburb of about 55,000 people. Police say about 60 people were working at the time of the shooting. The U.S. and China are continuing their trade discussions. Canada and China has also been in a lot of conversation about the 2 Canadians being held in China, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. Many feel it's in retaliation to the arrest of the Huawei executive last December in Vancouver. Huawei is looking to become part of our country's 5G network. Now, one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, says the decision to allow that to happen will not come now until after the federal election in October.
There is pressure on the Canadian government to say, this company is far too close to the regime in Beijing. They are far too close to the people that would seek to use any information they have to compromise our ability to collect intelligence. You can't allow this. Well, now that's been put off until after the next election, and I'm sure that in some way it will be an election issue for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals.
Brian will have more on the diplomatic tensions between Canada and China coming up after Business News. A woman in Medicine Hat is $1 million richer. Lynn Freundel was a big winner after checking out her old Lotto 649 tickets from earlier this month. She thought there was a mistake originally and had the tickets scanned a few more times. Freundel says she and her husband are going to go out, buy an SUV, a trailer, and travel across Canada. And a nice day for a drive today. We had another beautiful day in the Windy City, but some rain is on the way. Complete weather details are coming up. Another summer-like day, nice and hot. Tonight, mainly clear with a low near 12. Sunny and hot again tomorrow with a high expected near 32. A low pressure system moves in on Friday, bringing clouds and showers and a high near 30. The clouds should clear out just in time for the weekend. Sunshine and 29 is expected on Saturday, a clear sky and 27 on Sunday. For holiday Monday, lots of sunshine and 27 again. Tuesday, pretty much the same picture, blue sky and 27 degrees for Lethbridge. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 26 and an average low of 11. The highest temperature in the state was recorded in 1973 at 33 degrees, and the record low was 3 in 1968. Sunrise was at 6 a.m., sunset at 9:16. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. A slight chance of showers and 22 for Victoria, lots of clouds and 22 as well for Vancouver. Just a few clouds and 29 is on tap for Calgary on Thursday. Mainly sunny and 25 for Edmonton. Mainly cloudy and 29 degrees for Regina tomorrow. A chance of thunder showers and 29 as well for Saskatoon. It should be mainly sunny and 30 degrees in Winnipeg. Sunshine and 27 for Toronto. Mainly sunny and 28 degrees for Ottawa. Lots of blue sky and 27 for Montreal tomorrow. Expect thunder showers and 26 in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Rain and 29 for Halifax, Nova Scotia. Rain as well and 24 degrees for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect a mixture of sun and cloud and a high near 26 degrees tomorrow. Credit card company Capital One could face expensive legal fights down the road after a massive data breach released the personal information of 106 million credit card holders.
This is a unique situation in that we'd actually caught the person who was the perpetrator or the alleged perpetrator. The FBI arrested the individual and has brought charges against the individual. We're learning more about the breach. As between a company and their service provider, they will have a contract, which will determine who's liable. As between the company and their consumers, it's a mixture of their agreements with those consumers and applicable laws. And regulators will bring enforcement actions against companies that have security breaches for violating various laws. There are more laws out there now that require companies to maintain reasonable security.
Sobeys is making a move to go green. It plans to phase out plastic bags by February of next year. The company says shoppers will need to bring their own cloth bags or will lug home their groceries in paper bags. Sobeys says it is phasing out plastic bags in response to calls from customers and employees to use less plastic. Sobeys plans to get rid of plastic bags at some of its other stores, including Safeway, IGA, and Freshco later on. A rebound of manufacturing helped the Canadian economy grow for a third consecutive month in May. It rose 0.2% overall, with 13 of 20 sectors advancing. StatsCan says following an April decline, manufacturing expanded 1.2% overall as vehicle production returned to normal in May. The construction, transportation, and warehousing sectors all logged increases in May. Combines are expected to be rolling in southeastern Saskatchewan in the next week or so. Regional crop specialist Sherry Roberts says some wheat fields are starting to turn color and combines are being prepared for the harvest rush. Last year, she says farmers were harvesting on August 1st, and many fields were planted earlier this year than in 2018. Robert says crops look pretty good, and there are some disease issues, however. She expects an average to above average crop in the southeast. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alert Lethbridge's organized crime team made another drug bust. Police seized a loaded gun, a knife, meth, fentanyl, cocaine, and over $5,000 in cash. 47-year-old Eldon Myers and 50-year-old Sherry Komar face a wide range of charges including drug possession, trafficking, and firearms offenses. So which federal party do you think has been raising the most money heading into this fall's federal election? One of our regular contributors and political reporters, Brian Lilly, has details next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News Community Calendar. The Caribbean community invite you to celebrate the Lethbridge Caribbean Carnival Saturday, August 3rd at Galt Gardens beginning at 11 a.m. Enjoy a high-energy atmosphere filled with food, dance, music, and live performances. Admission is free. For more information, visit carabridge.ca. Southern Alberta Men's Ministry is hosting a barbecue and games day for men in the Lethbridge area on Saturday, August 24th at the John Martin Picnic Area in Pavan Park, beginning at 4 p.m. Enjoy an afternoon of hilarious fun and delicious food. Then hear an inspiring message from Jerry Pullman. Tickets are 2 for $10. Buy one for yourself and a friend. For more information and tickets, contact Leslie at 403-327-4422 and follow Southern Alberta Men's Ministry on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Easy Does It is an Al-Anon support group for adult children of alcoholics. Get an opportunity to share about your experiences with those who understand and learn healthy coping skills for your relationships. This group meets Thursdays at 7 p.m. at the Church of the Good Shepherd. For details, call Judy at 403-329-0661. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
There was another security breach for Canadian banking consumers. Hot on the heels of the Desjardins security breach comes news that around 6 million Canadians are part of the Capital One breach. Toronto journalist Brian Lilly has more. Now, Brian, what does this mean for millions of Canadians?
Oh, for millions of Canadians, they have to start wondering what exactly is not in their wallet anymore. They have to wonder, okay, did I apply for a card? Did I get a card? Was I approved for a card? Oh, if the answer to any of those is yes, you have to start wondering, okay, what part or what's the totality of my data that has now been hacked? And this is a massive data breach. As you said, 6 million Canadians, but many more Americans that are involved in this. And what is puzzling, very puzzling to me, Hal, you mentioned off the top the Desjardins. That's the major credit union that's out of Quebec, but they're starting to grow across the country, into Ontario, into New Brunswick, into different parts of the country. When Desjardins had a major security breach, there were calls for parliamentary committees to meet, emergency meetings. All the parties wanted to be seen on top of this. You know what I'm not getting in my inbox right now, Hal? Calls from any of the parties to say, oh, we need to have a major parliamentary committee meeting on this Capital One breach. And yet there are millions more Canadians that are affected by this than by the Desjardins breach. I think it comes down to Quebec politics versus politics in the rest of Canada.
A lot of Canadians are also concerned about the 1 million social insurance numbers, which also been compromised too. So yeah, security is a major issue. 2 former diplomats have come forward to say they were pressured to toe the government line on China, Brian. The Tories and NDP tried to investigate the issue recently, but were shut down?
They were shut down at committee. I mean, it's reminiscent of the SNC-Lavalin affair, where the Liberals are willing to hear people out until a certain point, and then they just shut down any attempt to call witnesses, to hear from people that may have been involved, and just say, no, we've heard enough. We know enough. The Prime Minister has said there was no attempt to direct pressure on these people. We're fine. The PM says it's good. Meanwhile, you've got 2 career diplomats. David Mulrooney, no relation to Brian. I've always got to point that out. David Mulrooney, no relation to Brian Mulrooney, career diplomat who went on to become Canada's ambassador to China from 2009 to 2012, and Guy Saint-Jacques, who was Canada's ambassador to China from 2012 until 2016. Both of these men say they received calls from a senior official in the Global Affairs Department who said to them, you know what, PMO just wants me to make sure that you understand that, you know, they're concerned that we're all on the same page. We want to make sure that we're not, you know, speaking with more than one voice when it comes to China. Look, Hal, all of this is very disturbing. We're talking about dealings with a country that is a dictatorial state, a country that, you know, does not broker dissent. And here we have our own government trying to shut down dissent on this issue. This is very troubling. And so the NDP and the Conservatives, they don't often agree on much, but they said, we should hear from witnesses on this. And the Liberals said, no, we heard from the PM. The PM says it's good. Therefore, it's fine. And let me tell you, he used similar language to what he used in the SNC-Lavalin affair. I've got to say that if I'm going to believe anyone, I'm going to believe the 2 career diplomats over the guy that is seeking re-election.
The decision on whether to allow Huawei to be part of our country's 5G network will not come now until after the next federal election. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, and this all relates to what we were just discussing about the issue around China and how the Trudeau government is handling it. Look, we detained Huawei Chief Financial Officer Meng Wanzhou back in December on an extradition request from the United States. And the Americans said, you know, we think that she has broken our laws in several different ways. If she comes through your territory, we'd like you to detain her so that we can seek extradition and put her on trial. She's in the middle of that right now. She has not been extradited to the United States. That is part of an ongoing court process. But the fact is that Huawei wants desperately to be part of our 5G network. And as we were discussing last week, they're already building a 4G network in Canada's north, where we're looking at 5G. You know, where you are, where I am, we're looking at 5G. That's the next generation of both, cell service and internet service. They don't even have that in Canada's north, and so Huawei is trying to ingratiate itself in the north with that, but they desperately want to be part of Canada's 5G network. This is a company that has funded research chairs at universities, all kinds of things that they're not allowed to do in other countries. And there is pressure on the Canadian government to say, this company is far too close to the regime in Beijing. They are far too close to the people that would seek to use any information they have to compromise our ability to collect intelligence. You can't allow this. Well, now that's been put off until after the next election, and I'm sure that in some way it will be an election issue for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, and they'll try to wedge it as in, if you're not in favor of Huawei, that in some way you are, I don't know, anti-immigrant or something like that.
Brian, our Prime Minister spent a lot of time flying from coast to coast. In fact, he was just in British Columbia recently talking about that British Columbians get it. They understand the Liberals because they talk about climate change, the environment, reconciliation, and he's really trying to seek re-election with a lot of these talking points. Some say Trudeau is using fear to win votes. What do you say?
Okay, just look at what he said to people in British Columbia. Well, you get it. You're on board with me, not like those Neanderthals in the rest of the country, not like Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba and probably most of Ontario and a good chunk of Quebec and maybe some people in Atlantic Canada. We're not like those people. Like, that is completely condescending, what Trudeau was saying. But when it comes to trying to invoke fear, he's absolutely doing that. We've talked about it before on issues surrounding firearms. His attempt to say that we've got to ban all kinds of guns or people are just going to die in mass shootings, which is not the Canadian experience. We've talked about it in terms of his push to make abortion an issue, when it's really not an issue the way it is in the United States. It's not an issue in the way that he wants to drive it here in Canada. And now, it comes down to whether you want to have subsidies for electric vehicles. Several of his ministers were in southern Ontario this week, and the big talking point was the Ford government in Ontario decided that they would not allow subsidies brought in by the former Wynne Liberal government in Ontario to continue. They said, you know what, we don't think that normal everyday citizens need to be funding subsidies for wealthy people to buy high-end electric cars. Well, the federal Liberals said, oh, the Ford guys are getting rid of that. We'll bring it back in. We're going to bring it in, and we're going to attack them on it. So even when they're asked about it, what do? They don't talk about the benefits of the program. They talk about how they are campaigning against Doug Ford. It's bizarre, Hal. Look, when Chrétien campaigned for his re-election in 1997, he campaigned on his record. When Stephen Harper campaigned for re-election in 2008 and 2011, he campaigned on his record. And when you campaign on your record and you attack the other guy, of course you're going to attack the other guy. You can win. But when you are just completely negative, as Harper was in 2015, you're probably going to lose.
Let's talk about the last fundraising quarter and compare some of the numbers here, Brian. Which federal party is leading the way so far?
Right now, it is the federal Conservatives. I mean, they've almost doubled the Liberals when it comes to fundraising in 2019. In the first 6 months of the year, and those are the times that we have the official numbers for, the Conservatives are at about $16.5 million compared to the Liberals. What are we looking at? 8.8 million. So they're not quite at 9 million. So the Liberals, the Conservatives haven't quite doubled them, but it's close. It's close to doubling the Liberals, and the Liberals are the party in power. Look, I don't care which party is in power. It can be the Liberals, it can be the Conservatives. If the party in opposition is out front fundraising you, that is a problem. It will be a problem if that happens for Jason Kenney in Alberta. It'll be a problem if it happens for Doug Ford in Ontario. Go across the country. If Andrew Scheer becomes Prime Minister and eventually the Liberals are out fundraising him, guess what? That means people are voting with their wallets and saying, we don't like what you're doing. Well, that's what they're doing with Justin Trudeau right now. They're voting with their wallets and saying, we're not fully on board with you. Now, is it a complete revolution against him? No, he's still raising about $8.8 million so far this year, about $15.9 million last year, but he is still trailing the Conservatives by a significant margin, and that has to be of concern for the Liberals heading into the election in October.
Brian, we now have 6 provinces fighting Ottawa's carbon tax. What's the latest there?
The latest is that they were meeting on Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday in Saskatoon. We had the Doug Schweitzer from Alberta. We had Doug Downey from Ontario. We had the Attorney General for Saskatchewan, for New Brunswick there. Quebec and Manitoba are, by the way, they're backing these or launching their own. Manitoba's launching its own constitutional challenge, and Quebec is backing Saskatchewan's. So we've got 6 provinces that are saying, we oppose this carbon tax. And they were holding meetings in Saskatoon and saying, how do we, try and plot strategy around our appeals to the Supreme Court? Saskatchewan lost 3-2. Ontario lost 4-1. It was actually kind of a 3+1 to 1. It was 3 against, 1 concurred in part, and 1 was on the dissension. But it's been a split decision in the 2 cases so far. So they've got a shot when it comes to the Supreme Court. I'm not going to say it's a slam dunk for them to win, but they have a shot. So they were off in Saskatoon plotting strategy. But you've got 6 out of 10 provinces now opposing this carbon tax. And you have to say, at what point does the federal government say, well, wait a minute, maybe we've got a problem with how we designed this? I don't think Justin Trudeau is going to admit to that months before an election, but maybe if he wins the election, he will reconsider how he's going to about implementing this, because if he loses the election, Andrew Scheer gets rid of the carbon tax. If he wins the election, he's facing 6 provinces fighting him in court.
And many of us here in Alberta like the fact that Environment Minister Catherine McKenna stated that they're not going to implement the federal carbon tax here in Alberta until January. But let's see if the Liberals will be re-elected. That's a big talking point here.
Absolutely.
Now, Brian, in the lead up to the federal election in October, the feds have spent a lot of money at tax dollars on our ads, promoting themselves, their causes with the Liberal Party. Is there not a spending limit?
There was a huge upswing when it came to, there absolutely are spending limits. And after the end of June, there are strict spending limits when it comes to government advertising. And I kind of like that, because the government should be telling you how great they are. I think the old hymn, how great thou. We shouldn't be having that from the government in the lead up to an election. They should be singing from their own hymnal when it comes time for re-election. But that's kind of what governments of different stripes have done over the years. And so the current rules say after the 30th of June, you can't be doing that anymore. So, but in the lead up, there was a huge spike of huge proportions. They went up to $17.7 million between April 1st and the end of June in spending on ads. And you have to say some of that has to be partisan in nature. Even if the ads are, fairly innocuous, you have to wonder if they're always telling you how great the government is, and the government of the day is insert party here, well, then you're going to feel good things about that party. So, maybe we need to look at stronger rules around that. If we're going to have rules, let's have real rules. Let's have stronger rules. But $17.7 million in 3 months aimed at television, Facebook, radio, all of that, it does seem a bit much.
Another Liberal will not be seeking re-election. Hunter Tutu says he will not run in October. But Brian, it's not just the Liberals, but other candidates from other parties have decided they're not running as well.
Yeah, about half of the Liberal fold in Nova Scotia is not running. And I think the total is about 18 Liberals that won in the last election. Forgive me if I'm wrong on the exact total, but I think it's about 18 that first won in 2015, not seeking re-election this time. Hunter Tutu is the latest. Leona Glukak, who held that riding for the Conservatives from 2008 until 2015, and at one point was the Minister of Health, she is seeking to retake that seat. So Hunter Tutu, by the way, had been, just to be clear, he had been kicked out of the Liberal caucus. He's one of many Liberal MPs that have had trouble, how do I put this gently, had trouble when it comes to relations with women. He had been booted from the Liberal caucus, but this is one of the seats that the Liberals stole from the Conservatives in 2015. So at this point, you could say not a loss for the Liberals, but, it is one they won in 2015 and one they likely won't win this time.
And we're looking forward to going live, broadcasting live from 7 till 9 or even 7 till 10 on election night, and you're going to be a big part of that. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.
What causes stress in your life? Is it your job? Maybe your kids, your marriage, noisy neighbors, maybe when your hockey team doesn't win? Mm-hmm. The next gentleman who's joining me at the desk has a lot of experience when it comes to stress and helping people deal with stress. His name is Gordon College. He's a certified life coach practitioner, marriage and family mediator. He's also a former instructor in family studies at Lethbridge Community College. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Good, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Gord, you and I actually go back about 30 years. We worked together at a Vernon radio station like a lifetime ago, about 30 years ago. Incredible.
Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? And that's part of what I've lived my life to reduce my own stress is by choosing different careers. I've had 3 or 4. of them since I was in the broadcast business.
And there's no stress at all
Oh.
in TV and radio news, not at
No,
all, right?
I mean, you could sit and watch television all day until you work for 5 hours, for 5 minutes, or whatever the length of time is. No, it's yes, it's amazing just what can cause us stress and set us off.
How would you define stress?
Stress, to define it, would be it's a multifaceted thing. That's why it's not a slick answer that I can give you, but in multifaceted, it could come from trying to open up a jar of pickled herring. It can come from trying to tear the hide off an orange. Could be somebody that left something on the carpet and you stepped on that Lego piece.
Right. I've done that a few times.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is, sometimes it's just pure life and living, but it's how we react and respond to those issues, how we learned to, and we can pursue that, because a lot of times we're just programmed, just conditioned to respond in certain ways, and that can add to our stress.
So how would you differentiate then, Gord, between stress or maybe just being a little concerned about something?
Well, I suppose it's in the longevity of it. For instance, some people, when they're just concerned, they may voice that concern. And that is the proper way. They need to express that concern to an individual that they trust and that can do something about it. See, we get, too many times it's the other way, and we end up getting cranky and upset over things we have absolutely no control over. A person could say, the wind, I just hate that wind that's blowing around here.
The sun is in my eyes.
And stuff like that,
Sure,
see?
yeah.
And that is just bellyache, right? And it's a useless conversation, and we should just work at getting rid of that method of expression, so that you've got an idea of being with certain people or coming into certain circumstances where you want to be able to have a positive encounter. See, sometimes it really gets us when people are not trying hard enough to make some changes in their life.
So maybe we have to cut some of those toxic, negative people out of our lives who are causing us stress. Yeah. I'm not talking about family members, because your family's with you to the day you die, obviously. But maybe your circle of friends. Yeah. You need better friends, more of a support system.
Yeah. And the way you can have fun experimenting with that is that you become very positive, conscious, positive. And so that you may walk into, if it's in a work setting or a classroom setting or wherever it is, you walk in there and say, I feel so good today. This is tremendous. Or look at that neat thing. And we stay in the positive. If you don't stay in the positive, or if you do stay in the positive, you will annoy a lot of people, and people are very uncomfortable when you're too positive and you're always walking around with a smile on your face. They just want to know what you're up to, and they're making all kinds of suggestions. That's an indication of how we've allowed ourselves to drift in our culture, and we get ourselves in a real bind. Another way sometimes is, how people say, "Hi, how are you?" And I think we need to answer that. But many times we go, "Yep, good." We don't say too much more. Why? Because that person,
they just keep walking.
Yeah, they keep walking because they know that if they, you see, and I have just feigned an injury. Sometimes I would, people say, "Well, Gord, how are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I am so glad you asked. I got a pain in my elbow and it goes up to my shoulder."
They'll say, "That's nice."
Yeah, and you watch them start to backpedal, and they'll, "Hey, we should get together." "Yeah, and we should get together. Maybe we could talk about this sometime."
Right.
they don't want any part of that, unless you've got a very unusual associate. So what happens is that we get ourselves in, and we get complaining, and we're just generally negative. And it can happen in the time it takes you to put your socks on in the morning, is that you can go from being pretty good to just frustrated, particularly if you got the sock sideways and something like that, and you just, it's when we do the research on these areas, it becomes really, really important that we do something in the positive way and rid ourselves of that negative association.
So life often throws us curveballs, Gord. How do we deal with those curveballs that we can hit them out of the park?
Yeah, that's a neat way of putting it. Perhaps it's still the same thing. It's how we react and respond to it. And again, some people internalize so that they just got that nasty phone call, or they just got something that's got them off their game plan. And so when that occurs, they'll take it in, and they brood on it, ruminate on it, go round and round and over. And each time they do that, they move closer to becoming quite irritated, quite upset, because it's coming through their fear. You could take anger apart, and it's fear, hurt, frustration, and anxiety. And if we can nail those things down and find out what's at the root there, oftentimes when I'm sitting with people and just discussing their situation, it just comes out that there's a deep-seated fear. And they become so upset with it because they've been brooding on it, that then you ask them, well, what can I do? Nothing. Nobody can do anything. So the irritation, the frustration, the bitter talk just really starts to get us. And you see, so we end up creating our own problem. Every time something changes, we experience a stress response or reaction.
Now, some people say technology is very positive because it helps us in our daily lives, keeping in touch with our kids or grandkids, helps us at work. Technology, computers, the internet, our cell phones.
Yeah.
But they can also cause a little bit of stress as well, can't they, technology?
Oh, absolutely. Because even for in the upper demographic, they're used to actually just a couple of channels of television. And so now they get punching with their, and they hit some button, and they're, and then they have to phone the television company to reset it. Those things get it. We also, in discovering people had a certain upbringing that the more buttons to push, the more things that can go wrong.
Right.
And so they stand back from it all, and trying to get Skype going, or doing face-to-face or something like that is such a challenge for people.
It's interesting, Gordon. I'm glad you brought that up, because I have a family member, I don't want to say who, but this family member bought a newer vehicle, and this family member covered up with tape a lot of the buttons and a lot of the
Well, there you go.
this person really didn't need on the vehicle. It's like, I've got my speedometer, I know where to put it in drive, where the radio is, the heater, that's all I want, right?
Yeah, exactly. The same thing with the cell phone. And we realized we had to get out of the flip phone, so then we go to this smartphone, and all the time, if you stand in a store listening to the exchanges between people and the clerks in there, they'll say something, I just want to be able to say hello on phone and just get my message, and I like that texty thing, I like that, but my fat fingers, I can't get going here. See, so it's yin and yang, the way that we struggle sometimes with that. And again, it comes back to saying, all right, what really is getting to me, and what can I do about it? So much of it, our programming, just the attitude that we have got, and how quickly we flare when something doesn't work the way we think. Because I'm not reading that whole book on the manual. That's right. You know, I'm not. Don't want to have anything to do with that. I just want to be able to do this and do that. And hello, and yes, and so. Yeah.
What kind of relationships cause us stress? I mean, a lot of times it's family members, maybe in our marriage or our kids, sometimes our coworkers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Sometimes the closer the relationship, like a spouse is, and a parent, or children, all of them, there's can be some real change, a real stress there. My brain's getting ahead of me a little bit, and I see, if we go back to thinking that anything that changes creates a stress reaction in me, and so I have to learn to be okay with things that change. You know, we talk about an old saying used to be like, I can just spin on a dime. I can just wheel around and go this way. Sure. Okay, if this doesn't work, I've got 4 more where that idea came from. And those are very vibrant people, but man, they're not stress-free. These are your type A that are so driven and compulsive, and just show it to me, and I could just, you know, I could repaint the studio between coffee breaks.
That's impressive, by the way.
Yeah, it would be. But you know, nothing holds them back. But with family, with spouse, children, they start changing. Change a hairstyle, change and challenge you a little bit why they can't wear that T-shirt, and back and forth it goes, and we sometimes are becoming increasingly inflexible now, and the more inflexible we become, the more stress that we put on ourselves and others.
So Gord, bottom line is, how can we handle and deal with the stress that's best for us and our families? Maybe start meditating on God's word and in prayer?
That would be an awesome beginning, because there are so many examples in Scripture of Christ didn't heal everybody. He didn't even stop to talk to everybody. And yet there are some people that they're just going out of their way to make sure everybody is done. They end up with either the Messiah complex, or you can have the Martha complex. And look at how fussed up those sisters got. And one in the kitchen and just getting everything done, and the other one lounging in the living room listening to the master, right? Those stories are just so fascinating and appropriate, that we can make all kinds of changes in how we behave. It is very much a behavioral problem. And we take a look at how I got this far. Like if I'm opening up a drawer and it doesn't come all the way open, what do? I keep pulling on it.
Well, you put your foot into it, or maybe your shoulder into it.
Anything, see, because, but I got a pretty good idea who messed that drawer up. and all of that is flashing through a person's brain in no time at all. Well, you know, we call it inappropriate behavior or whatever, but it's just plain silly. It does no good. And people say, well, it's just the way I am. Yes, it's the way you are right now. But with conscious effort, you can change big time. You don't need to get flaring and upset, and if that piece of Lego in the carpet it doesn't call for any attack on the child that might have dropped it in there. I mean, I really would love to see a cleanup in human behavior where people become a little more courteous, a little bit more kind. There's all kinds of good things that we can do without getting ourselves all fussed up and frustrated by everything that's going on.
Absolutely. Gord College, certified life coach, practitioner, marriage and family mediator. Thanks a lot for joining me here today in studio at Bridge City News.
It's been a pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.